She had it all, a beauty, fame, power. But behind every camera flash, there was a secret. Hollywood called her a legend. The world called her a sinner, and she called it all survival. 7 husbands, 7 stories. But only one truth she never told until now. And this is the story of Evelyn Hugo, the woman who lived 7 lives to hide one heart. The first time Evelyn Herrera saw her reflection in a movie poster, she was standing outside the Roxy Theater on 49th Street. The rain had just stopped, leaving the city soaked in neon light. She was 16, broke, and wearing a secondhand coat that still smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. The poster showed a glamorous blonde actress smiling beneath the words, "A star is born." Evelyn looked up at it and whispered, "So will I." Her real name didn't sound like a movie. Stars. Evelyn Herrera was the daughter of Cuban immigrants, a girl from Hell's Kitchen who knew hunger better than hope. Her father drank away what little money they had, and her mother used to say, "Beauty is your ticket." Mias, but tickets don't come free. That night she took her mother's advice to heart. She packed her only dress, a photograph of her mother, and a dream too big for the small apartment she was leaving behind. She didn't look back. The train to Los Angeles. The train smelled of coffee and coal smoke. Evelyn sat by the window, watching the gray skyline fade behind her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself in a silk gown under flashing lights, reporters shouting her name. She practiced smiling in the reflection of the train glass, the kind of smile that could hide every bruise, every fear, every lie. A woman across from her, a dancer heading to California, leaned forward and said, "You got someone waiting for you in LA?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Not yet, but they will." Arrival in Hollywood. When she stepped off the train, Los Angeles shimmered under a golden sun. The city felt alive, palm trees swaying, cars roaring, people laughing like they belonged to something bigger. Evelyn didn't belong anywhere yet, but she swore she would. She rented a small room behind a diner and took a job serving milkshakes to studio runners and extras. Every night she listened to their stories, the names of producers, casting directors, stars who could make or break a dream. One of them noticed her, a young camera assistant named Ernie Diaz. He was kind, humble, and hopelessly in love with her the moment she smiled. Evelyn wasn't in love, and not yet. But she saw something in him, a chance. That night she stood outside her tiny room, staring at the Hollywood sign glowing faintly in the distance. The wind carried the faint hum of music and laughter from some party she'd never be invited to. She whispered to the sky, "They'll know my name one day." And in that moment, Evelyn Hugo was born, even if no one else knew it yet. The first time Ernie Diaz called her Evelyn, she realized how easy it was to let her old self fade away. He was a quiet man, kind eyes, rough hands, and a smile that made people trust him instantly. He worked at a film studio garage, fixing cars that belonged to men who owned the world. Evelyn would stop by after her diner shift, still wearing her uniform, pretending she was just being friendly. But she was studying him, the way he talked about the studio, about actors who needed stand-ins, about opportunities no one else noticed. Ernie wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he had something she needed, a way in, the marriage of convenience. It happened fast, a cheap wedding in a small church on the edge of Los Angeles. She wore a borrowed white dress, and he held her hand like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Inside, Evelyn's heart was steady, not racing, because she wasn't marrying for love, she was marrying for freedom. Ernie was her visa to Hollywood, a husband who could give her a last name that sounded less foreign, more marketable, a passport to auditions, studio sets, and the dream she'd been chasing since New York. "You'll see," she whispered to herself in the mirror after the ceremony. "I'll make you proud, Mama, even if I have to lie to get there." Her first break. Weeks later, while Ernie fixed cars for movie stars, Evelyn walked through studio gates pretending she belonged. She started small, background roles, silent smiles, extra parts no one noticed. But she noticed everything. How to stand where the camera loved her, how to smile without looking desperate, how to make people believe in the image, even if she didn't believe in herself. One day a casting agent told her, "You've got the face for fame, but the name, too ethnic." That night, she looked in the mirror and whispered the name that would change everything. Evelyn Hugo, the goodbye. Success came faster than love ever did. When Evelyn got her first speaking role, she came home to find Ernie waiting with flowers and dinner. He told her, "You don't need to work anymore, honey. I'll take care of you." But she wasn't the kind of woman who wanted to be taken care of, not anymore. She wanted the world. A week later, she left a note by his bed. "You gave me a start, Ernie. But I can't stay small anymore." She didn't cry. She didn't look back. Because Evelyn Hugo was moving forward, and Hollywood was finally watching. Dawn Adler. Hollywood loved stories like hers, the poor girl who became a star. But Hollywood didn't love her. Not really. It loved the idea of her. When Evelyn met Dawn Adler, she was already Evelyn Hugo. Blonde hair. Perfect smile. The woman every camera wanted. Dawn was born into fame. The golden boy of a powerful studio family. Handsome and cruel in the way only men with everything could be. He told her on their first date, "Together we'll be the next Hollywood royalty." And she believed him, because she wanted to. The golden couple. Their wedding was a national event. Reporters shouting questions. Cameras flashing like thunder. Evelyn stood beside Dawn, the picture of a perfect wife, waving to crowds that would never know the truth. Behind the smile, she was terrified. But ambition can make fear look glamorous. They were the it couple. Magazine covers, red carpets, movie premieres, their faces were everywhere. But when the camera stopped flashing, Dawn's smile did too. The darkness behind closed doors. The first time he raised his voice, she thought it was stress. The second time, it was jealousy. The third time, she understood this was who he really was. "You think you're better than me, Evelyn?" He hissed one night, his grip on her wrist leaving bruises. "You'd be nothing without my name." She didn't cry, not once. She just smiled the next morning in front of reporters, perfectly powdered, perfectly fake, because Evelyn Hugo had learned long ago. In Hollywood, pain is just another scene to perform. Breaking free. Rumors began to swirl, cracks in the golden image. The studio told her to stay quiet, to protect Dawn, to think of her career. But Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who stayed silent forever. When she found out Dawn was cheating with his co-star, she didn't confront him. She did something smarter. She called the press herself. She made sure the cameras were there when she left him. Tears perfectly placed. Story perfectly framed. By morning, headlines screamed, "Evelyn Hugo, heartbroken but brave." Hollywood didn't see a victim. It saw a survivor. And Evelyn Hugo knew exactly how to turn heartbreak into power. They met under a ceiling of neon lights and cigarette smoke. Evelyn was 24, already divorced twice, already a legend in the making. Mick Riva was Hollywood's favorite bad boy. A singer with a velvet voice, an ego to match, and a smile that could convince the moon to shine brighter. He was chaos dressed in a tuxedo. She was loneliness wrapped in silk. And for one dangerous night in Las Vegas, they were perfect for each other. The night that burned bright. The party was a blur, champagne, laughter, and the hollow thrill of being adored. Evelyn had just finished a grueling film shoot, Dawn's betrayal still echoing in her chest. Mick leaned close, his breath warm against her ear.
"You and me, Evelyn," he whispered.
"We could set this town on fire." She laughed, a real laugh for the first time in months. It was the kind of laughter that comes right before disaster. Hours later, they stumbled into a neon-lit chapel, both too drunk and too broken to care. The preacher slurred through the vows. The photographer snapped a flash. And just like that, Evelyn Hugo became Mrs. Mick Riva. The morning after. The sunlight in Vegas is cruel. It exposes everything, even mistakes made under the influence of champagne and loneliness. Evelyn woke up to find Mick snoring beside her, lipstick smeared on his collar, wedding ring shining like a bad joke. Her stomach turned, not from regret, but from clarity. "You wanted to feel something," she told herself in the mirror. "Now you do." She called the front desk, booked the first flight back to Los Angeles, and left before he even woke up. By the time Mick realized what had happened, Evelyn's lawyer already had the annulment papers ready. The headlines spin. The tabloids went wild. Hollywood's fastest marriage. Evelyn Hugo breaks another heart. But Evelyn didn't hide. She posed for the cameras in a red silk dress, smiling like she'd planned it all. Sometimes, she told a reporter, a woman has to make her own headlines. What they didn't know was that behind that radiant smile, Evelyn was tired, not of love, but of pretending it mattered. For her, fame had replaced affection. Applause had replaced intimacy. But somewhere deep down, she still longed for something real, something she could never quite name. By the time Evelyn met Rex North, she wasn't chasing fame anymore, she was managing it. Every photo, every smile, every rumor had a purpose. Hollywood didn't control her now. She controlled Hollywood. Rex was her equal, handsome, sharp, and every bit as ambitious as she was. They met on the set of Angel's Kiss, a romantic epic that was destined to become a box office phenomenon. From the first table read, the chemistry between them was electric, the kind that makes producers see dollar signs and audiences believe in love. But what no one knew was that the love story on screen was a business deal off it. The perfect proposal. It wasn't romantic, it was strategic. After a long day of filming, Rex poured 2 glasses of champagne in his trailer and said, "You know what would make us unstoppable, Evelyn? If the world thought we were in love." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting a publicity stunt?" He smirked. "I'm suggesting a contract. You get the headlines. I get the roles. We both win." She took a slow sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. Then she smiled, that iconic, dangerous smile. "Mr. North, you've got yourself a deal. Hollywood's golden couple." Their wedding was a masterpiece of illusion. The press called it the most glamorous union in Hollywood history. Evelyn's gown shimmered like starlight. Rex looked every bit the charming husband. They posed for magazine covers, walked red carpets hand in hand, and kissed under camera flashes like it meant something. In public, they were perfection. In private, they barely spoke. Evelyn slept in one wing of their mansion, Rex in the other. They didn't need love. They needed leverage. But something unexpected happened. Evelyn realized she admired him, not as a man, but as a player who understood the game as well as she did. The contract ends. 2 years later, Rex fell for another actress, a young starlet whose innocence looked good on movie posters. He came to Evelyn one night, guilt in his voice. "I think it's time we end the show." She smiled calmly, pouring herself a drink. "Of course, darling. Let's give them a finale they'll never forget." The next morning, the Hollywood Gazette printed, "Evelyn Hugo and Rex North, a love that outshone the silver screen." No scandal, no anger, just grace. Because Evelyn had learned the truth. In Hollywood, endings are just another performance. Evelyn had known Harry Cameron for years before she ever thought of him as anything more than a friend. He was a producer, kind, clever, the sort of man who listened instead of waiting to speak. In a city of masks, Harry was the rare soul who didn't need one. He saw Evelyn not as a scandal, not as a headline, but as a human being. And for a woman who had built her entire life on illusion, that was dangerously intimate. The friendship that became everything. It started with late-night conversations on studio sets. When everyone else had gone home, they'd sit under dim lights, sharing cigarettes and secrets. "You know," Harry once said softly, "you don't have to keep performing when it's just us." Evelyn smiled. "I wouldn't know who I was if I stopped." He laughed, and not at her, but for her. And in that laugh, she found the kind of warmth she'd stopped believing in, the marriage of truth. When Harry proposed, it wasn't like the others. There was no flashbulb, no PR deal, no agenda. He simply said, "We could protect each other." She understood. They both had secrets, the kind that could destroy careers in 1960s Hollywood. Harry was gay. Evelyn loved someone she could never name out loud. Their marriage was built on trust, not passion, a partnership against a cruel world. They were each other's shield, and in time, that became a kind of love deeper than romance. They built a home together, laughed together, raised a child together. To the world, they were perfect. To each other, they were safe. The tragedy that changed everything. Years passed like scenes in a dream. Then came the night that tore it all apart. Harry was driving home with his partner, the man he truly loved, when their car crashed on Mulholland Drive. Harry survived, barely. The other man did not. Evelyn arrived at the hospital to find him broken, not just in body, but in soul. He took her hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll protect what we built, even if it means they hate you." She did, and she kept that promise, even when it meant lying, covering the truth, and carrying the weight of his secret for the rest of her life. Closing scene. After the funeral, Evelyn sat in the empty house they once shared, holding his favorite record in her lap. The music played softly, a song they used to dance to in the kitchen, barefoot, laughing like fools. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hugo cried because she realized, out of all her husbands, Harry Cameron was the only one who had ever truly loved her right. After Harry's death, Evelyn promised herself she'd never love again. But promises are fragile, especially when whispered to a heart that refuses to stay lonely. Years later, when director Max Gerard walked into her life, she saw in him something familiar, the same hunger she once had, the same ambition that had built and broken her. He told her, "You're not just a legend, Evelyn. your art. And for a woman who had spent her whole life being used, the idea of being admired felt almost like love. The return to the spotlight. Max convinced her to star in his new film. Her big return after years away from Hollywood. The press called it the comeback of the century. Every day on set, Max looked at her like she was something divine. He memorized her lines before she spoke them, studied her expressions as if they were poetry. Evelyn told herself it was passion, but deep down she knew it was worship, and worship has nothing to do with love. The marriage of illusion. They married in Paris, a quiet ceremony by the Seine. No press, no witnesses, just champagne and empty promises. Max held her hands and said, "You're everything I ever wanted." She smiled softly, whispering, "Then you've never truly known me." He didn't understand. He never would. Because Max didn't love Evelyn Hugo. He loved the idea of her. He loved the woman on screen, the goddess in emerald silk, the living myth. But the real woman, the one who cried in empty rooms and whispered to ghosts, was invisible to him. The quiet ending. The film was a masterpiece. It won awards, revived her name, and put Max among Hollywood's elite. But when the applause ended, he moved on to the next starlet. Younger, easier, brighter. Evelyn didn't fight it. She simply smiled, signed the divorce papers, and said, "Thank you for reminding me what love isn't." That night, she poured herself a glass of wine and watched her own movie alone. On screen, she looked radiant, powerful, untouchable. But in her reflection on the TV screen, she saw the truth. She had become a woman adored by millions but loved by no one. By the time Evelyn met Robert Jameson, she was no longer chasing fame or love. She was chasing peace. Her beauty was still timeless, but her eyes had changed. There was weariness there, the kind that comes from surviving. Everything you once thought you wanted. Robert wasn't a director or an actor. "Clara," I said, "sometimes love isn't about starting over." He didn't ask for her secrets, and that was exactly what she needed. The marriage of convenience. They met at a charity gala, both pretending to belong in rooms they no longer cared about. Robert admired her grace, her poise, her silence. "You're nothing like what the papers say," he told her once. "That's because they've never met me," she replied. He didn't love Evelyn the way Harry did. He didn't understand her like Celia did. But he gave her something neither could. Quiet. They married without fuss, without headlines. No cameras. No spectacle. Just two people trying to find a place to rest. The ghost of Celia. Even in peace, Evelyn carried her greatest heartbreak, Celia St. James. The woman she truly loved. The woman Hollywood never allowed her to keep. Some nights, Evelyn would sit alone by the ocean, watching the tide pull away, whispering her name. "Celia, if love had been fair, you'd still be here." Robert never asked who she was crying for. He simply sat beside her in silence, an act of love in its purest form. The end of an era. Years passed. The cameras forgot her name, but Evelyn didn't mind. She'd built her empire, lived her legend, buried her pain. When Robert died quietly in his sleep, she didn't shed dramatic tears. Instead, she closed his eyes and whispered, "You gave me the calm I could never find on my own." After the funeral, Evelyn walked back into her home filled with old photos and fading magazine covers. Each husband had taught her something. Each love had carved a different scar. And now, standing before the mirror, Evelyn finally said aloud, "You were all I needed to survive, but only I could learn to forgive myself." The interview. Years later, when Evelyn finally told her story to journalist Monique Grant, she didn't do it for fame or forgiveness. She did it to leave the truth behind. The real story behind the emerald gowns and tabloid headlines. Because Evelyn Hugo knew that legacies fade, but truth doesn't. And when the world finally heard her truth, they didn't just see a movie star. They saw a woman who had lived, loved, and lost with no apologies.